Hi there, my name's Julian from Station Road. Welcome to another one of my videos, and this time I feel a need for the tour part 3. So in this part 3 I will introduce you to my locomotive stock, which isn't huge, so it's not going to be a long video, and just some other little bits and pieces. This lovely portable or detachable workbench I've now made, so I've purpose built this for video filming work, so I can just pop this out when it's not necessary, and it supports itself from an open cupboard door. So this will be good for for weathering and kit building, taking closer looks at locomotives or rolling stock, looking at I can pop some of these things off the baseboard and actually bring them up close so we can rotate them around so you can have a look at those in more detail. So that's the reason behind this. I've also decided it was just going to be far easier to purchase a wee lapel mic, which I bought, and that plugs in. I've also set up my camera now, so it's actually me over here as well, so I can remote control everything, which will be great. So anyway, without further ado, I shall introduce you to my locomotive stock. Right, as I mentioned, my collection of locomotives is not huge compared to some people's collections I have seen on YouTube. So everything all fits into one cabinet. There are a few there's 2 locomotives actually that are currently on the layout, which I'll show you in a minute. But otherwise, and also the top line is, of course, got some rolling stock in it. So anyway, starting at the second line down is a Class 105 DMU from Bachmann. Next track down, a recently purchased Class 24, or is it a 25? I can't remember which. I think it's a Class 25, and its running number is D5182. It is also Bachmann in pristine condition. It is one of the later Bachmanns. Most of these locomotives, I think all of these locomotives are actually bought secondhand, but that particular Class 25 has the 21 pin chip, so it has directional lighting and cab lights. No, it doesn't have cab lights, but it does have directional lighting. This next one over is my Class 20, which is one of my favourites, and it's factory weathered. It's also Bachmann, and it's just an amazing locomotive. I just love the detail on it, and it's a 21 pin chip, but I can't remember. I should have investigated whether it has directional lighting or not, and I really can't. I don't think it does. The next one over is actually my dummy Class 20. It is actually an old Lima locomotive that I have stripped the guts out of it, and it just simply doubles with my powered Class 20 in order to create a double-headed train. At the end there is a Bachmann Class 24, and although it's in the blue BR blue livery, which I know was coming in the maybe mid to late 60s, I'll give myself a bit of creative license on whether any of these locos would have actually coexisted in these particular liveries at any point during the 1960s, but it is one of my favourite locomotives, that Class 24. I kind of like the 24 over the Class 25, because the 24, of course, doesn't have the head code boards up above. Heading down, let's go back to the left hand end, down to the next row, and that is a Hornby Class J94, running number 68071. I bought it second hand. It was extremely cheap, and I figured out why it was extremely cheap. It's factory weathered. From a distance, when you look at it, it looks good, but on closer inspection, I think it's got some hand-me-down tooling from another manufacturer, and I can't remember who it is. Next we have the Hornby Evening Star. It was, when I was very young, I had one of the very first Hornby Evening Stars, which was a tender drive locomotive. This is a non-tender drive locomotive, so this is chassis driven, but its modelling detail is still kind of inherited it from the older Evening Star 9F. So in terms of detail, it's not brilliant. The second one is the 9F, also Hornby, Crosty, factory weathered. I think it's from it might be the railroad range. So, but it does have a bit more detail. It is more finessed than the Evening Star in terms of its handrails, the windows, and things like that. The interesting thing is, I used to have a Bachmann 9F. I think it was just a standard 9F class, and unfortunately I discovered that it was not going to run on my layout, because at one point in my layout has a second radius curve which the Bachmann would not get around. It could get around it, but it was just too iffy. I discovered that the Bachmann 9Fs, the slackness in the axles is nowhere near as what Hornby had designed for their locomotives. So the Hornby 9Fs have a much looser axle shift, which means they can actually I think they could probably even squeeze around a first radius. That's why if I ever get any more 9Fs, I probably will have to stick with Hornby 9Fs, just simply so that they run on my track. The one at the end there is a Class K3. It's one of the locomotives that I would like to weather, but I'm actually too scared to. It kind of needs to be weathered, because I think, the period that I'm doing, which is in the late 50s but more into the early 60s, they were around, but I'd imagine that by that point they would have been so unloved and so unkept. From appearances, that they may have looked almost as if they weren't going. So that locomotive needs some heavy weathering done to it in order for it to look more authentic within the era that I'm modelling. Down here, back down on the bottom track at the left hand end, is a Class 03. Once again, it's in the blue livery, so I'm kind of pushing the boundaries of the era, but as I said before, I've just taken a little bit of artistic license to push that. This is one of the later Bachmann Class 03s. It is the post-split chassis version, so it does have DCC on board and is chipped and so forth, whereas the next locomotive, they visually look similar. It's the Class 04, but that is an older Bachmann which had a split chassis, and that was actually quite a challenge to chip, but I did pull it off reasonably successfully. They run okay, those two, but as everyone will be aware, the smaller the wheelbase, the less contact it has with the rails, and therefore performance is not as brilliant. The blue one does run much smoother than the green one, but the green one's actually very old. I won't get rid of them, because they're just so gorgeous. They're cute little locomotives, and even if they're actually just positioned in places within shunting yards or so forth. The next one over, of course, is the good old trusty Class 08 Bachmann, and that's a great locomotive. It has its gearing is wonderful. It just crawls along. It's almost to the point where you can't see the movement to the naked eye. It's really amazing. The next one over, which is a more recent purchase, was the Class 4MT. I got that because the 210Os and the K3, as far as I'm aware, they were more sort of freight orientated locomotives, and I know that the 4MT, of course, was a mixed use locomotive, but as far as I'm aware, they were quite commonly used for suburban passenger trains and so forth. So that's why I purchased that, and it just adds a bit of variety. It's beautifully detailed. It runs like a dream. The last one here on the end is the Class 6P, and it is actually it's a much older Bachmann locomotive, and it probably, gosh, maybe even in the 80s, no, maybe 90s, it might have come from that sort of manufacturing period. It is a split chassis locomotive. It actually, for its age, actually runs really well, and of course it was an absolute nightmare to chip it, but I've managed to successfully chip that with modifications to the chassis. So that's what's in the cabinet, and we'll swivel around and show you there's two more locomotives that we have on the layout. So this is the Class 22. It's one of my favourite locomotives. It's probably one of the more sort of up there expense-wise as well. It's a Daypole locomotive, reasonably recent. It's not too old, and it is of course got directional lighting and cab lighting. It's an incredibly smooth running locomotive, and the detail is just fantastic. And down here we have another Class 25, also a Bachmann. This is an earlier Bachmann, so it has the 8-pin chip. It doesn't have any kind of directional or cab lighting or anything like that. So that's my locomotive setup, and I thought I will leave you now with just a brief running session, and we'll catch you next time with the next video. Thank you very much everyone for watching, and don't forget, please subscribe and also hit the bell, which means that you'll get notifications the next time I pop up a video.